A researcher sits alone in the dim reading room. In front of her is a small, weathered, and torn manuscript. She puts on her glasses and turns to a random page. She finds strange plants spiraling into impossible shapes and leaves. Women bathing in pools of green liquid. Star constellations not even from our skies. Beside all that, strange text flows in careful lines. She tries to read them, but the words make no sense at all. They don't belong to a single language on Earth. For over 600 years, this manuscript has guarded unknown secrets. It's known as the Voynich Manuscript, the world's most mysterious book, a puzzle that has driven scholars to madness and sparked theories ranging from conspiracy to extraterrestrial. Emperor Rudolf II sits in his study in Prague Castle, surrounded by books, artifacts, and curiosities collected from across Europe and beyond. Rudolf has little interest in ruling. Instead, he pursues his real passions: alchemy, astronomy, and the occult. A servant enters carrying a small book, which Rudolf examines carefully. Strange plants, celestial diagrams, text in an unknown script. It's perfect. Exactly the sort of mysterious, possibly dangerous knowledge he craves. He summons his imperial chemist, Jacobus Horsecki de Tepanek, into his study. Perhaps Horsecki can decode it. Rudolf hands over the manuscript and exits. Horsecki takes Rudolf's place in the study and attentively turns to the first page. At first glance, it appears unimpressive. It's small, barely larger than a modern paperback. The plain brown cover hangs limp and battered. Insect holes pepper the pages. The edges bear labels and stretch marks from previous owners, but open the book and everything changes. The manuscript contains approximately 240 pages, though scholars estimate another 30 are now lost. The pages are made of calfskin vellum, folded into gatherings of 8 leaves. The text uses an alphabet unlike any other. Some letters resemble Latin characters, others look like numbers, and then there are the tall, looping symbols scholars call gallows letters for their eerie resemblance to a hangman's scaffold. The writing reads left to right across the page, with clear spaces between words. Strangely, there are almost no corrections, no crossed out words, no visible mistakes. It's as if the entire manuscript was written perfectly from start to finish. After skimming through the book, Horsecki decides that it's not worth his time for the moment. He turns back to the first page, signs his name on it, and goes back to his own chamber, where he puts the manuscript away among his many other alchemy books. After Horsecki's death, the manuscript passed through the hands of several of his students and colleagues, before ending up in the hands of a minor alchemist named George Barskius 30 years later. Barskius is writing to Athanasius Kircher, the famous Jesuit scholar in Rome. Kircher is known throughout Europe as a master of languages, a decoder of ancient texts. If anyone can solve this mystery, surely it's him. Barskius' letter makes the first assumption regarding the manuscript. From the pictures of herbs, of which there are a great many in the codex, and of varied images, stars and other things bearing the appearance of chemical symbolism, it is my guess that the whole thing is medical. Barskius even includes hand-drawn copies of some pages. Surely this will intrigue Kircher enough to respond. However, until the letter reaches Kircher and he responds, Barskius takes matters into his own hands and begins his attempt at deciphering the first section of the manuscript. The herbal section comprises roughly half the manuscript. Each page features a drawing of a single plant accompanied by paragraphs of text. Some drawings look vaguely recognizable, perhaps a lily pad, maybe a sunflower, possibly a violet, but most are utterly bizarre. The illustrations show incredible attention to root structures, suggesting the artist cared deeply about what lay beneath the soil. Medieval Europe had a long tradition of illustrated encyclopedias of plants and their medicinal properties. These books typically showed what a plant looked like, where it grew, and what happened when you consumed it. In these times, plants were the closest thing to medicine, and so each was believed to have specific healing properties. The manuscript follows this format precisely. Each plant gets its own page with detailed text, presumably describing its properties and uses. But the plants are very unfamiliar. One theory suggests the artist drew from verbal descriptions rather than actual specimens. This was also common in medieval times. Artists often depicted animals they'd never seen, which explains why medieval elephants look so absurd. Perhaps someone described exotic plants from distant lands, and the artist attempted to recreate them from memory. Another possibility is that these are the real plants, but stylized or diseased specimens that no longer exist. Some researchers claim to have identified specific species like a water lily and a pansy, perhaps even an oak tree on one of the fold-out pages. But these identifications remain controversial, with most experts unable to match the majority of illustrations to known species. A darker theory suggests the plants never existed at all. If the manuscript is an elaborate hoax or a work of pure imagination, the botanical impossibilities make perfect sense. An alchemist or charlatan inventing a system of fake medicine wouldn't need fake plants. Imaginary herbs for imaginary cures. The crude application of paint over careful ink drawings adds another layer of mystery. The underlying sketches are meticulously detailed, drawn with steady precision, but the colors seem splashed on by an amateur, implying that either more than one person had worked on the manuscript, or that the original artist might have taken extended hiatuses between writing. Without labels, without a readable text, without confirmed identifications, the botanical section still remains as mysterious. Back in Basquias's laboratory, weeks pass, then months. Finally, a reply from Kircher arrives in the form of another letter. His tone is cool, dismissive. The manuscript would take no great genius to decipher, he writes, but I'm far too busy with more pressing matters. Infuriated, Basquias crumples up the letter and throws it away. Unable to decode the manuscript's mystery himself, he places it in a wooden chest, intending to eventually leave it for someone who might have a better chance. Athanasius Kircher examines a package that had just arrived from Prague. His old correspondent, Johannes Marcus Marci, had sent the manuscript Basquias obsessed over for so many years. Basquias had written it in his will that the book would be left to Marci, but if he fails at decoding it, he should make another attempt at getting Kircher to examine it. Kircher had seen countless mysterious texts in his long career. He's published works on Egyptian hieroglyphs, Chinese language, magnetism, music theory, and a dozen other subjects. He's consulted with emperors and popes. And so, with all that experience under his belt, he starts flipping through the pages. But one section specifically intrigues him enough to stop and examine. The manuscript's next major sections focus on the cosmos. All over these pages are circular diagrams and star charts, some folding out into large spreads. These are the most visually striking and baffling portions of the entire book. The circular charts include very elaborate concentric rings. Some researchers believe these represent calendars or astronomical clocks. Others think they're symbolic representations of celestial spheres. The drawings are covered with mysterious annotations crowding every available space. In the following pages, zodiac symbols appear: Pisces, Taurus, Libra. But there are oddities. The sign for Cancer is represented by 2 lobsters instead of a single crab. Sagittarius appears as a human male carrying a crossbow rather than a centaur with a bow. Women holding stars orbit these zodiac diagrams. Their bodies are drawn in the same crude style as the plants, but their positions and the careful annotations suggest they represent something specific, perhaps constellations or specific dates or times when certain medical treatments should be administered. Medical medicine and astrology were deeply intertwined. When you took medicine was considered just as important as what you took. Alchemical manuals from the period provide health advice based on zodiac signs and planetary positions. During the Leo months, for instance, people would take medicine for the stomach, heart, and liver, while something like bloodletting was reserved for the Aries months. Perhaps the manuscript star charts aren't random at all. Maybe they're reference sheets outlining the best times to harvest herbs, prepare medicines, or administer treatments. The women holding stars could represent dosages, timing, or specific patients. Yet fascinating details appear in this section. Beneath each zodiac sign is a month name written in a language that resembles French. Avril for April, May for May, Août for August, Novembre for November. The closest match is Occitan, a language once widely spoken in southern France. This single readable element has led some researchers to suggest the manuscript originated in that region. Kircher rereads the same section repeatedly. He can't immediately identify the language or the cipher system. Perplexed, he sets it aside. After months of working on other projects, Kircher decides to abandon the manuscript altogether and places it among his huge collection at the Collegio Romano, where it will sit largely forgotten for the next 2 centuries. "47-year-old Wilfrid Voynich enters a college in Frascati, outside Rome. He is greeted by discreet Jesuits who take him to a secluded part of the college. Voynich hands them a pouch full of money, and as soon as they are done counting, one of them unwraps a small, damaged leather manuscript and hands it to him. He suspiciously looks around, making sure no one could see him, before he opens his newly acquired prize, a wicked smile drawn upon his face. Voynich finally returns to his London bookshop, where he examines his acquisition carefully. Tucked inside the cover is a letter dated August 19, 1665, written in Latin by Johannes Marcus Marci to Athanasius Kircher. The letter mentioned that the manuscript once belonged to Emperor Rudolf II of the Holy Roman Empire, who supposedly paid a fortune of 600 ducats for it. However, the letter did not mention an author, a point of origin, a purpose, or even a language. In Voynich's hand is now either a lost treasure of knowledge or a complete hoax. But with enough fascination, he closes up his bookshop early to comfortably begin reading his newly acquired prize. The manuscript's strangest section is the biological section. It shows dozens of small naked women bathing in pools of green liquid. The pools are connected by elaborate pipe systems that wind and curl like intestines or blood vessels. Some drawings resemble accurate anatomical parts like fallopian tubes and ovaries. One prominent theory suggests these are medicinal baths. Balneology, the study of therapeutic bathing, was a popular medicinal practice in medieval Europe. Guidebooks detail public baths and hot springs across Italy and other regions, each bath supposedly offering specific healing properties for different ailments. If this theory is correct, the manuscript might be documenting unusual bathing methods, some form of elaborate hydrotherapy system. Another theory focuses on the anatomical resemblance. The tubes winding through the drawings look remarkably like human reproductive systems. Some researchers believe this section deals specifically with women's health, like childbirth, menstruation, or fertility treatments. This interpretation gains traction from the fact that all the bathers appear to be women. In 15th century Europe, the only place women would have bathed together was in a mikvah, a ritual bath used by Jewish women after menstruation or childbirth. Orthodox Jewish practice requires women to visit these baths. A theory suggests that the manuscript was written by a Jewish physician, which would explain several unusual parts of the manuscript, including why it might have been written in code, as Jewish medical practitioners in medieval Europe often faced persecution and had to operate in secret. Yet another interpretation suggests these baths aren't medicine at all, but alchemy. In medieval alchemy, liquids were heated, distilled, and transformed through elaborate apparatuses. Whatever these diagrams represent, they're unlike anything else in medieval medical literature. Scholars have searched for comparable images in contemporary texts and found nothing quite like the manuscript's elaborate bathing scenes. The sun shines through the windows of Voynich's bookshop, who had fallen asleep with his head on top of the last page, having spent all night reading. Still fascinated by the intrigue of the manuscript though, Voynich decides that his discovery needs to be seen by the public. He tucks the manuscript away in his private safe and begins planning his next steps. In a crowd of distinguished scholars and wealthy collectors, Voynich presents his discovery. Behind him, Displayed on stands are pages from his manuscript. He spent 3 years building publicity for this moment, organizing exhibitions across America. This is the Roger Bacon cipher manuscript, he tells his crowd, a work of genius encoded to protect its revolutionary secrets. The audience leans forward, studying the bizarre plant drawings he selected for display. One shows a flower with bulbous roots that spiral into cube shapes. Another depicts stems that twist and tangle in ways no plant ever could. A third features bright, garish petals unlike anything in nature. Voynich watches their faces carefully. He's asking $100,000 for the manuscript, roughly $1.4 million in today's money. One of the bidders expresses interest, and Voynich hands him the manuscript. The bidder sits down by the stand, flips forward to a random section, and begins reading. The manuscript's final illustrated section shows drawings of plant parts, especially roots, alongside what appears to be apothecary jars or containers. These vessels come in various shapes and are colored in reds, blues, greens, and yellows. They look like lab equipment, the kind used by medieval physicians and alchemists. The jars and vessels suggest this section deals with preparing medicines. In medieval pharmacy, herbs would be dried, ground, mixed with other ingredients, and stored in specific containers. Different medicines obviously required different storage. Some needed sealed jars, others breathable vessels. Some required special materials to prevent contamination. The recipe section concludes the manuscript with dense blocks of text. Stars in the margins mark individual entries of distinct recipes or formulas. No illustrations are in these pages, just paragraph after paragraph of the indecipherable script. Throughout these sections, small details might offer more than what they might seem. On one page, a dragon feeds on plant leaves. On another, a corpse lies in a corner, perhaps warning of deadly consequences. The largest foldout contains an image of a castle, suggesting geographical location or ownership. One of the final pages features a goat and a naked woman in the margins, possibly illustrating the final recipe, or rather signatures or symbols of the author. These pharmaceutical and recipe sections represent the manuscript's most practical elements. If the earlier part deals with theory, these final pages contain the actual applications, the hands-on instructions for creating medicines. Confused, the bidder hands Voynich back his manuscript. He calls him insane for asking too high of a price over an unreadable book. Voynich leaves his fare disappointed, but not hopeless. If he must decode the book to be able to sell it, then he knows a person who might help. Professor William Romaine Newbold stands before the American Philosophical Society, his moment of triumph at hand. He's cracked the Voynich manuscript. After years of painstaking work, he's decoded the cipher that has stumped everyone else. Wilfred Voynich is in the front row, barely containing his excitement. This is it. This is the moment that will prove his manuscript's value, that will justify his decades of certainty that it contains earth-shattering secrets. Newbold explains his system. Microscopic markings on the letters themselves, visible only under magnification. The cipher is brilliantly complex. Newbold claims the book is written by Roger Bacon, a 13th century scientist. Newbold believes Bacon described microscopes, telescopes, and cellular structures. These scientific discoveries would have been written in the manuscript centuries before their invention, meaning the book contains knowledge far ahead of its time. The audience is stunned. If true, this rewrites scientific history. Newspapers pick up the story. Newbold begins a lecture tour. Before each tour, however, Newbold sits down to refresh his memory on certain sections of the manuscript. Looking past the illustrations, the writing itself is what makes the Voynich manuscript unique. The text contains over 170,000 characters arranged into roughly 35,000 distinct words. The alphabet contains approximately 20 to 25 unique letters. Some resemble Latin characters with simple curves and lines that almost look familiar. Some look like numerals. And then there are the gallows letters, tall, looping symbols that repeat. The structure shows clear linguistic patterns. Words are short, ranging from 2 to 10 letters. Spaces separate them consistently. The writing flows left to right across the page, wrapping around illustrations when necessary. Statistical analysis reveals that the text behaves like natural language. Word frequency follows Zipf's law, the mathematical pattern where the second most common word appears half as often as the first, the third most common word appears a third as often, and so on. All natural languages follow this pattern. Random gibberish doesn't. But there are still irregularities. Some letters only appear at the beginning of words, others only appear at the end. Some letters can repeat 2 or 3 times in a row, which is unusual in Indo-European languages. The text is also highly predictable. When you see one letter, you can often guess what comes next. Researchers have identified 2 distinct dialects or languages in the manuscript. Most of the book is written in Voynichese A, while the bathing and star sections seem to be written in Voynichese B. The handwriting suggests multiple authors, or perhaps one author at different periods of their life. Modern computer analysis has tried every approach, treating it as a simple substitution cipher, a complex polyalphabetic cipher, a book code, a shorthand system, even an invented language. Nothing has worked. Every attempted solution either produces gibberish or requires so many arbitrary rules that it becomes meaningless. After Newbold's tours, within a few years his solution collapses. John Matthews Manley, a renowned medievalist and World War I codebreaker, demolishes every aspect of Newbold's theory. The microscopic markings are just cracks in the ink. The cipher system is so complicated it couldn't convey information reliably. The translations are products of Newbold's imagination, not the manuscript. Deep down, Voynich knew that Newbold was wrong, but he never stopped believing. This time, if colleagues cannot help him, perhaps the government can. US Army cryptographer William Friedman gathers his team of cryptologists. They're the best codebreakers in America, the same team that cracked Japan's purple cipher during World War II. The war is winding down, and now they need a new challenge. Friedman has been fascinated by the Voynich Manuscript since 1925, when he first corresponded with Wilfred Voynich. For nearly 20 years, he studied it intermittently, always convinced he was close to a breakthrough. Now, with the world's greatest code-breaking minds assembled and time to spare, he initiates what scholars call the First Study Group. On their first meeting, they begin with a rough reading of the Voynich Manuscript. For decades, experts assumed the Voynich Manuscript was some kind of cipher. Medieval Europe had a long tradition of secret writing. Alchemists encrypted their formulae, scientists protected their discoveries, diplomats sent encoded messages. Roger Bacon himself wrote about cryptography, describing 7 methods for concealing information. Leonardo da Vinci used mirror writing to protect his ideas. Coded texts were common enough that scholars like Athanasius Kircher regularly received requests to decipher them. But if the Voynich Manuscript is a cipher, it's unlike any other ever created. Simple substitution ciphers, where each letter is replaced by another symbol, don't match the text patterns. The frequency of letters is wrong. The combinations are also wrong. The predictability is too high. Polyalphabetic ciphers, which use multiple substitution alphabets, also don't fit. These create more random-looking text, not the highly structured one in the manuscript. Book codes, where the number refers to specific words in a reference text, also seem unlikely. The manuscript contains too much text, and the word structure doesn't look like sequences of numbers. Besides, without knowing which book was used as the key, such a code would be unbreakable. Some researchers believe that the text combines multiple encoding methods. Perhaps it's a substitution cipher using an artificial language, or a book code that's been further encrypted, or a shorthand system based on an obscure dialect. The more layers you add, the more secure the message. but also the more difficult for anyone, including the original author, to decode. This raises a practical problem. If the code is so complex that decoding it would take hours of painstaking work, why create such a large text? The codebreakers had worked methodically, applying every technique they knew. They analyzed letter frequencies, looked for patterns, and tested various cipher systems. But after months, they find nothing. The team disbands in 1946, frustrated but fascinated. Friedman continues working on the manuscript for the rest of his life. He corresponds with other researchers, develops new theories, always believing the solution is just out of reach. By the 1960s, Friedman abandons the cipher theory entirely. In his final written thoughts on the manuscript, he concludes it's probably an early artificial language, invented for universal communication, now lost to history. As for the manuscript itself, it remained locked away in Voynich's house, even after his passing. Ethel Voynich dies at age 96 in her apartment on West 24th Street. She's outlived her husband by 3 decades. Her will leaves her possessions to Anne Nill, her companion and Wilfrid's former secretary. Among those possessions is the manuscript, still sealed in a bank vault after 30 years. Wilfrid's attempts at selling the book have proven useless. No buyer was ever willing to pay the astronomical price he demanded. Within a year, Anne Nill finally succeeds where the Voyniches failed. An Austrian book dealer by the name of Hans Kraus arrives at Anne's house, briefcase in hand, having corresponded with her regarding an interest in buying the book. After a thorough examination, Kraus buys the book for $24,500, less than a quarter of Wilfrid's asking price. After returning to Austria, Kraus immediately relists it for $160,000. There are no buyers. After 8 years of trying, Kraus admits defeat. In 1969, he donates the manuscript to Yale's Beinecke Library, where it has remained ever since. In 2009, researchers finally answered one of the manuscript's most fundamental questions: when was it made? 4 small samples of the parchment underwent radiocarbon dating at the University of Arizona. All samples gave matching results. With 95% certainty, the book was created between 1404 and 1438. This single finding eliminated several theories. Roger Bacon died in 1294, over a century before the manuscript's creation. The dating also made a theory that Wilfrid Voynich forged the book extremely unlikely. Finding that much matching medieval parchment would have been nearly impossible. The parchment alone would have cost a fortune, way more than Voynich could have expected to recoup by selling the manuscript. Further testing revealed additional details. The parchment is calfskin. Finding calfskin meant the manuscript could have originated anywhere in Europe where cattle was raised, which is to say, nearly everywhere. The ink is iron gall ink, common throughout medieval Europe. There's nothing unusual or distinctive about it. Multispectral imaging showed that the parchment had never been written on before, with no erased earlier texts, no recycled pages. This was fresh vellum used specifically for creating this manuscript. The binding tells another story though. The current cover is relatively modern, probably from the 19th century. Insect holes on the first and last pages suggest the original binding was wooden, eventually destroyed and replaced. The manuscript was rebound at least once, probably between 1824 and 1870, when the Jesuits updated their library at the Colegio Romano. All the physical evidence points to authenticity. The Voynich manuscript is genuinely a 15th century document created somewhere in Europe by someone who went to a considerable expense and effort to produce it. The arrival of the internet brings the Voynich manuscript to global attention. Digital copies spread across the world. Discussion groups form. Amateur cryptographers join professionals in attempting to solve the mystery. Every few years, someone announces a breakthrough. Each time, the Voynich research community examines the claims. Each time, the solution falls apart. In 2016, Two researchers claim it's encrypted Hebrew. Their methods rely on algorithms and Google Translate. The resulting translations are grammatically nonsensical. The theory is dismissed. In 2017, a television producer claims it's written in abbreviated Latin. The historical linguistics community points out numerous flaws in his methodology. His solution is rejected. In 2019, another researcher suggests it's a Proto-Romance language. Experts note he's making arbitrary assumptions and choosing words that fit his theory rather than following the text. Another failed solution. The pattern repeats endlessly. Announcement, excitement, examination, rejection. The manuscript continues to resist all attempts at translation. After decades of serious research, most scholars have converged on a few plausible explanations, while dismissing the more outlandish claims. The medical text theory remains most widely accepted. The manuscript sections all relate to medieval medicine: herbs for remedies, astrological timing for treatments, bathing for hygiene and health, pharmaceutical preparations, and recipe formulations. This fits perfectly with 15th century medical practice, where all these elements would be a part of a comprehensive healthcare system. The strange drawings might represent real plants, just poorly rendered or stylized beyond recognition. The baths might depict actual hydrotherapy systems used in medieval spas. The star charts could guide timing of treatments. The recipes might contain genuine medieval remedies, ineffective by modern standards, but believed to work at the time. The constructed language theory has strong support, particularly after William Friedman's advocacy. Perhaps someone attempted to create a universal language, a philosophical tongue that could be learned by speakers of any native language. This would explain the linguistic structure without requiring it to match any known language. Medieval scholars did experiment with such systems. Hildevard von Bingen created the lingua ignota in the 12th century, an invented language with its own vocabulary and alphabet. Other philosophers proposed universal languages based on logical principles rather than historical development. If the Voynich Manuscript represents an early universal language attempt, the author might have been trying to make medical knowledge more accessible. The irony would be that by inventing a new tongue, they made their text completely unreadable once the language rules were lost. The Jewish physician theory explains several anomalies. The month names resembling Occitan suggested southern France, where Jewish communities thrived. The anatomical bathing scenes could represent mikveh rituals. A Jewish physician in medieval Europe would have good reason to encode their text, to protect against persecution, to preserve knowledge in secret, and to maintain a competitive advantage. This theory also accounts for statistical patterns suggesting Hebrew influence, though the text isn't straightforward encrypted Hebrew. The professional secret theory points that a physician or alchemist created their own elaborate code to protect trade secrets. In an era before intellectual property laws, a valuable medical formula or alchemical process was worth enormous sums. Encoding it in a private cipher, perhaps combined with an artificial alphabet and abbreviated language, would prevent competitors from stealing your knowledge. The problem with this theory is the sheer complexity involved. Creating hundreds of pages of encoded text in a consistent system requires immense effort that likely wouldn't be worth it. The hoax theory has lost credibility, but hasn't completely disappeared. Some still argue the manuscript is an elaborate prank, possibly created to fool someone like Rudolf II into paying vast sums for worthless gibberish. But the statistical analysis showing language-like patterns argues strongly against this. Creating gibberish that perfectly mimics linguistic structure would be nearly impossible without modern computers. And the expense of materials, the time required, the consistent execution over 240 pages, it seems excessive for a mere fraud. Most researchers now believe the manuscript contains real information encoded in some way we haven't yet deciphered. Whether that information is valuable, interesting, or mundane remains unknown. The Voynich Manuscript now sits in its climate-controlled storage in Yale University, available by appointment to qualified researchers. It accounts for 11% of all traffic to Yale's digital collections. People from around the world examine its scanned pages. searching for patterns, testing theories, hoping to be the one who finally cracks the code. But after 6 centuries, it remains unread. The world's greatest codebreakers have failed. Advanced computer algorithms have failed. Artificial intelligence has failed. The Voynich Manuscript keeps its secrets. The secrets remain locked, the mystery endures, and somewhere, perhaps the medieval author who created this enigma is smiling, knowing their work has achieved a kind of immortality that even the greatest decoded text could never match.